Just after midnight, the sky feels wide and untroubled. The air has that soft cool that makes windows fog at the edges. A slow, pale green sits where stars gather, like a lantern set at the far end of a quiet pier. I'm here with you, voice low, hands still, letting the room fall into its own hush. We'll drift toward a visitor from the deep between stars, not to solve it, but to listen. You can lie back and let the day release its grip. If it helps, switch your phone to Do Not Disturb and loosen the last thread of attention. Headphones are welcome, though not required. We'll take this gently, step by patient step. I'll keep you company as we sketch what astronomers see and what it likely means, without hurry and without alarm. You may find your breath sinking with the pace. If your thoughts wander, that's all right. I'll still be here, tracing a calm line through the dark. If you enjoy these long, drowsy passages through quiet science, you're invited to follow the playlist and subscribe, so new night journeys find you when you want them. Your presence shapes what we explore next. But, for now, there's nothing to press or plan. Only the soft rhythm of a story unfolding. The water is flat as glass in my mind's eye, and on it rests a faint green halo, patient as a harbour light. I'll keep the beam steady. You can let your eyes close whenever they wish. We begin with a first glimpse of the traveller and the gentle way it announces itself against the dark. This is enough. A still frame, held long enough for the eyes to settle. A key of dark wood, breathing the tide. Over it hangs a soft green trace, no louder than moon paint on old water, a lantern set somewhere far beyond the reachable pier. Nothing moves except the thought of movement, like the faint swing of a moored boat you only notice by its reflection. In that quiet, a visitor announces itself without sound. It doesn't blink or flare. It simply appears where the sky thins into depth and stays there, a patient hue, as if colour could be a kind of message that says only, I am passing through. We watch the frame without chasing it, and the frame rewards us by remaining calm. This is where we begin. From far outside the sun's ordinary neighbourhood, something small has come into view, carrying cold with it the way a stone carries river chill. I call it a traveller because that word behaves politely in the dark. You do not need to know every measure to feel what it means. A traveller crosses one room of the house of stars, pauses by our lamp, and continues on. The path it follows is not a circle that comes home, not a long oval that returns after ages, but a line that bows inward and then opens back out again. I say this softly, so it lands like a blanket, not a bell. It is distant. It is ordinary in its physics and extraordinary in its origin. We are safe here, listening. Imagine drawing a loop that never closes. Your pencil curves towards the center, turns at its nearest point, and then drifts away so gently you almost miss the moment of turning. That is the shape of this visit. The sun cools, but not strongly enough to keep the cooler. Gravity tries to make a companion, and instead becomes a host for one night. The traveller keeps more of its first speed than the sun can borrow. If numbers were needed, we could chase them, yet tonight we let the idea carry us. A path can be a feeling. This one feels like a door that opens inward, and then, with a soft hinge, opens outward to the same dark corridor. You and I stand in the threshold and watch it pass. Now your eye returns to the colour. Green is a quiet thing in the sky, and yet it is not a mystery for the ages. Sunlight touches a veil around the visitor and wakes small fragments of carbon into a brief emerald whisper. The glow is not paint, but process, the breath of molecules startled into shine and then gone again. In some visitors, the hue is thin. In others, it deepens like mint in cold water. Ours carries its own recipe from wherever it formed, a recipe kept in darkness for a very long time. When warmed, it releases a perfume of light that our instruments can pass and our eyes can simply enjoy. You do not have to memorize the names to feel the truth of it. Light meets dust and gas, and for a while the night wears a soft ribbon. Elsewhere, domes open and close like eyelids. On high desert ridges, mirrors tilt and settle. In orbit, patient machines ride their unending dawns and dusks. Each one lifts a thin thread of data and sends it into the common loom. The loom is not urgent. It does not shout. It repeats, compares, corrects, and listens again. From many angles, the same traveller appears, a little brighter, a little fainter, a little moved along its script. Those who watch are practiced in the art of waiting, trimming the sail of attention, resisting the gust of first impressions. They add this visitor to a small album of true interstellar guests, not to elevate or alarm, but to learn what cold preserves and heat reveals. In time, the album will page forward. Tonight, we pause on this page. Let the room make its own weather for a minute. The window breathes a cooler stripe across the floor. A quiet fan moves the curtain and keeps a steady promise. Somewhere down the block, a lone car turns once and is gone. Pipes in the wall tick as if counting. Your pillow finds the shape of your cheek and remembers it. If you listen past the listening, there is the slow hush of air itself, like shore foam after the wave, nothing to do but arrive and slip away. The green outside keeps its place while you drift between breaths. You may not notice when your shoulders drop. You may not care which second does the work. This minute is simply a soft room in which a distant thing continues to be distant, and that is all it needs to be. What matters, for now, is the gentleness of first contact. We recognized a path that does not belong to our family of comets, and we recognized a color that belongs to sunlight, working on simple things. No omen, no emergency, only a clean line through the dark and a patient halo that follows. The traveller will write its single sentence across our sky and then close the book behind it, leaving us with a margin note in green. I will keep the page open long enough for your eyes to grow heavy. When they finally close, the lantern at the end of the pier will still be there, steady as breath. That is enough to carry us forward. That is enough to rest upon. What kind of path never closes on itself? Think of a road that bends toward a town, slows at the square, and then keeps going into the night beyond the last porchlight. That is the feeling I want you to hold. A line that bows in toward the sun, then opens back out, leaving the solar neighborhoods as quietly as it came. I call it an unclosed arc, a courtesy visit, rather than a homecoming. We do not chase it with alarms or countdowns. We trace the curve with our breath, and we let the notion settle. Some travellers arrive with enough first momentum that no welcome, however warm, can persuade them to stay. They lean near the fire, turn once in its glow, and continue down the long, cool road. You and I watch that road without hurry, The way emptiness receives them feels almost kind. Speed and pull are old companions. One remembers the push that launched it long ago. The other is an invitation from the sun, patient and strong, but not infinite. When the memory is larger than the invitation, the guest remains a guest. The curve we see is the compromise between those two truths. You can imagine the sun setting out a table, heat as bread and light as water. The traveller accepts a little warmth, leaves a little shining in return, and moves on because its stored haste outweighs the host's gravity. No drama, no tearing loose. Just a measured pass, like a bird that dips to drink from a river and then lifts, still wet, still flying. The arithmetic lives in observatories. The feeling can live here, where the room is dark and the pillow fits. Many comets that visit us are family. They come from a far, cold cloud that belongs to the sun's own story, falling inward on long, patient ellipses, then circling back after ages. Their paths, though stretched thin, still loop. This one does not. Its lane does not share the household rules. It crosses the plane of our planets the way a side road crosses a highway, purposeful, angled, indifferent to our traffic. No old resonance shepherded it. No familiar corridor carried it here. It is not a repeat customer. It is a passerby from elsewhere, and that elsewhere is simply the wider galaxy, where stars keep their own gardens and sometimes throw a seed to the wind. The unclosed arc is the signature. It says softly, not from here, not staying, only passing through. And because it is gentle, we can rest with that. If you prefer a picture to a proof, draw 3 shapes in your mind. First, a circle that loops back to itself, neat as a clock. Then, an oval that still returns, stretched but faithful. Last, a curve that swings near the center and refuses to reunite with its beginning. A road that will not meet its tail. The first 2 are bound by the sun's keeping. The third is not. Astronomers have crisp words for this, and they keep the numbers where the numbers belong. For us, the names are less important than the feel. The unclosed arc tells you a story of origin, of a launch elsewhere, of a long drift between stars before this brief bow. It is a 1-sentence letter slid under our door, signed in a hand we can read but do not recognize. We place it on the table and smooth the page. We have seen letters like this before. One arrived lean and strange, more shard than fountain, teaching us that not every visitor throws a bright veil. Another came with the familiar breath of a comet, dust and gas, and a tail that took the light well, a more textbook messenger from the outside. Together, they taught us to expect variety without surprise. A traveller from beyond does not owe us a likeness to our own kin. It owes only its truth, a path that does not close, a speed that remains just larger than the sun can borrow, and a chemistry that tells of a childhood under different lamps. Those lessons sit quietly in the back of every new observation. They keep us from forcing a shape onto the visitor that it does not carry. They make room for difference, which is another way to say they make room for learning. Let's step aside from names and instruments for a minute and walk the late road together. Out the window, the street has gone to charcoal. A single scooter murmurs once and leaves a thin ribbon of sound that fades at the corner. Someone waters a plant on a balcony, and the drip finds the gutter with a tender patience. Air presses the curtain inward, releases it, presses again. The clock does not tick so much as breathe. In the distance, a train horn folds itself into the night and disappears like a thought you meant to write down and then forgave. Your hands are cooler now. Your jaw remembers how to be unarmed. The unclosed arc feels less like a fact and more like a walking pace, a steady forward that asks nothing but companionship. We give it that and keep our seats. Why does a single pass matter? Because even a brief lane through sunlight can turn the traveller into a speaking thing. Its surface loosens, its veil brightens, its colour tells on the ices it kept safe in a darkness longer than our histories. One pass is enough to compare families, to tune our instruments, to test our patience for quiet answers. It's enough to remind us that the map of home includes doors that open outward, not just paths that circle the yard. And it is enough, tonight, to ease the mind. The road that doesn't loop is not a threat. It is a promise that the sky is larger than habit and kinder than fear. The green grows faint at the edge of vision. The line continues, and we let it go. Fade with it now, if you like, into a sleep that keeps the road in view and the room at peace. 1:17 a.m., a pale wash behind the rooflines, quiet as breath on glass. The colour is not a shout. It is watercolour bled into cold paper, a cool mint halo that seems to hang from nothing at all. Streetlight moths make slow figure eights, and the sky keeps that faint green as if it were a memory rather than a thing. In the dark, green feels gentler than blue, softer than white. It smooths the hard edges of thought the way fog softens a shoreline fence. If you wait, the tint deepens and thins in small pulses, like tide against stones. I keep my voice under the surface, naming nothing you must carry, only pointing so your eyes can rest. The glow is patient. It does not insist. It lingers like a brushed thumbprint on a window pane, then loosens again into the night. Under that glow, ordinary sunlight is doing its small, exact work. The traveller sheds a faint veil of gas and dust when warmed, and in that veil some of the simplest carbon pairs wake briefly. They are not paint. They are a moment of chemistry. Light touches a molecule, snips it into quicker pieces, and for a breath those fragments shimmer green before they fade. Think of it as a tiny chorus that sings only when the lamp is on and the air is thin enough to carry a pure note. Some nights the chorus is full, other nights it is a humming undercurrent. The names for those singers belong to the lab. Here, it is enough to know that carbon can glow in this key when sunlight and space meet in a narrow band around a cold, small world. The colour is a consequence, not a clue to anything fearful. Why does it wax and wane? Because the veil is alive only in the simplest sense. It forms where warmth reaches and thins where shadow returns. The traveller turns like a slow lighthouse, and different patches breathe at different hours. Grain by grain, frost by frost, some places loosen easily and others hold on. A dozen quiet jets may add their threads, then pause as the face rolls away from the sun. Distance matters too. Farther out, light is thinner. Nearer in, the chorus has more to sing. Even the angle between us and the tail can change how much glow we read, like tilting a sheet of silk so one fold shines and another goes dim. None of this is strange. It is the sky doing what it does when a long cold surface meets a steady lamp. Hold the picture and let your senses widen for a minute. kettle on a far counter clicks as it forgets its own heat. A gecko's soft feet measure the wall and vanish. Air from the window makes a faint river through the curtain hem, a sound you only hear when you stop naming it. In the alley, a bin lid settles with a patient thunk, then nothing. Your shoulders find a low place on the mattress, and stay. That green outside is a veil you could almost lift with 2 fingers, thin as a leaf held to a lamp. It is there, and then less there, and that is the most faithful thing a colour can be. Breathe with it. Let the wash fill and drain without demanding a reason. The reason exists. It will wait while you rest. Other travellers have carried a related hue. One passed with more dust and a classic fountain, its chemistry generous with the ingredients that take light well. Another slipped by like a shard, quiet in gas but quick in motion, its message written more in path than in colour. Comparing them is like holding 3 pieces of sea glass to the sun. Different thickness, different tints, same simple physics under the shine. Where carbon-rich ices sit near the surface, sunlight can tease them into that mint glow. Where other ices dominate, the light may read as colder or thinner. None of this makes one visitor better than another. It only tells us they grew up under different lamps, stored different winters, and now reveal those histories in their own mild tongues. We listen and let each voice be itself. How do we know which voices are singing? By splitting the light and weighing its colours, the way a musician hears a chord and names the notes. Telescopes on dry mountaintops use filters that pass only the green of a certain carbon pair, or the violet of another simple fragment, letting observers map where the veil is strongest. High above weather, patient instruments collect the warmth those gases give off in the dark, sketching out which ones are present even when our eyes see only a blended haze. One tool listens in the infrared, another in visible light, a third in narrow bands that ignore the rest. Together, they make a small quilt of agreement. Yes, there is a mint halo tonight. Yes, it breathes with rotation. Yes, it thins as distance grows. The methods are careful. The result is calm. And when the lamp lowers on the long table of space, the wash quiets. Green lets go first, like dye running out of a brush rinsed under a tap. The night returns to its usual graphite, the stars a little sharper against it. What remains is the knowledge that colour can be a clock you read without numbers. A brief brightening when warmth peaks, a soft fade as the traveller turns away, a hush when cold takes the lead again. You can hold that clock the way you hold your own breath, neither forcing nor counting, only noticing the easy loop of it. The mint halo thins to memory. The window is a darker mirror now, and your reflection has closed its eyes. Let the colour dissolve, gentle as steam leaving a cup, and go with it towards sleep. Listen with me for a moment. The room has its own small weather. A low fan turning, the hush of the street after midnight, the refrigerator's slow vowel, a gecko's dry step along the wall. Air threads the curtains and returns, like sleep rehearsing itself. Far above this ordinary soundscape, a speck meets sunlight for the first honest time in ages. In that meeting, there is no crack or flare, only a change too gentle to hear. The speck warms by fractions, and the silence takes on a different weight. Picture frost that has never known noon. Picture it under a lamp at last. A thin breath lifts from the surface, tentative as a first sigh in a cold room. Nothing about this is hurried. Heat moves through dust and ice with the patience of winter surrendering to spring. Sublimation is a soft word for a soft event. Ice does not puddle. It loosens into gas straight from its quiet lattice when the light's touch is strong enough. The traveller's crust is a patchwork, some grains dark and eager to warm, others bright and stubbornly cool. Where darkness gathers, the lamp bites deeper. There the first sigh forms. Gas seeps through pores and seams, searching for the easiest path to the sky. In places the pores join hands, and a vent appears, smaller than a city block, smaller than a street, yet large enough, in vacuum, to matter. What we see from here is only the consequence. A veil that thickens a little, a green that freshens, a tail that leans more decisively away. The mechanism stays quiet. The feeling reaches us just fine, because the surface is uneven, the breathing is uneven. A ridge faces the sun and answers, a hollow lingers in its own night and keeps its frost. The traveller turns, and new patches wake while others rest. Out of some patched seams, narrow jets rise, thin, sunlit strands that carry dust, like sparks riding a chimney draft. The word jet sounds brisk, but the action is gentle at this scale. You would not hear it even if you stood nearby, which you do not. You would only notice that the veil around the nucleus thickens in fans and spokes that rotate with the day. A first sigh becomes a pattern of sighs, each with its own rhythm, as if the body were learning how to breathe in warm air after a lifetime of cold. The turning matters. Imagine a lighthouse head sweeping a beam across low fog, then leaving it to collapse before the next pass. The traveller's rotation plays the same kind of game with sunlight. When a vent rolls into morning, its thin plume stands up straighter. When noon passes, the plume softens and breaks into threads. Far away, watchers record a pulse in brightness that looks almost like a heartbeat. They do not hurry to name the period. They collect nights, then compare them the way you compare breaths when you are trying to sleep. A pulse appears, then another. The veil looks fuller, then thinner. The rhythm is not a message. It is a side effect of shape, tilt, and turn. Still, it comforts to find order where chaos might have been. Beneath the veil, small physics keep going. Sunlight unbinds molecules. Molecules rush outward. That rush nudges grains that have been resting in the weak glue of frost. Some grains lift and ride the flow. Some fall back in slow arcs and settle elsewhere, smoothing one place, roughing another. The gas expands and cools as it escapes, and the warmth it stole from the surface is spent in the act of leaving. None of this is dramatic. It is kitchen slow, like steam leaving a kettle and fogging a window you meant to clean. If you were to press a finger there, you would draw a temporary path in the haze. The traveller does the same, again and again, writing and erasing its own fine textures with every hour of light. It helps to say aloud what this is not. It is not proof of purpose. It is not an engine deciding to fire. It is a natural answer to a star's invitation, at a distance that keeps us entirely, comfortably separate. Instruments watch from hills and from orbit, but nobody needs to rush or whisper into a headset. The first sigh does not become a shout. It becomes a routine, stronger, weaker, then strong again, until the day's heat has done what it can, and the slow night clamps down. In that clamp, volatile ices retreat into deeper shelter while the skin stiffens. Tomorrow, The same cycle may run a little louder or a little softer. As the traveller draws nearer the sun, the lamp brightens. As it moves away, the lamp dims. The script is old and perfectly ordinary. Now let's stand by the window and let the room be itself. Curtain against cheek, a thin edge of night air on the teeth, the street a corridor of quiet concrete and plant shadow. Someone laughs 2 buildings over, then closes a door with care. A motorbike passes once and leaves a warm ribbon that cools in seconds. You place your palm on the glass and feel how the outside conducts its gentleness inward. The traveller does the same with light on its skin, accepting what comes, releasing what it must, and then resting. I pull the window to, just enough to dull the distant sound. The latch finds its seat without complaint. Outside, the veil goes on breathing. Inside, the air is held, the lamp low, the bed a small harbour for your bones. The night window closes, and the sigh that began far away finishes here. Come a little closer, but only in thought. Let your breath shorten the distance, and then lengthen it again. The turning point we visit has an old name, the moment of nearest nearness, when the traveller leans closest to the sun, and then begins, without fuss, to lean away. Think of it as pausing at a warm doorway on a winter night. You feel the heat on your face. You do not step inside, and the next footstep is already outward. Nothing sharp happens. No edge snaps. The change is mostly in the balance of light and shadow on a small, stubborn body. Its skin has been learning the sun for days. Now it knows enough to meet the brightest hour without surprise. We watch from far safety. We say the word softly, closest, then quieter still, turning. The path is the same, only the sign flips from approach to depart. At this nearness the veil grows fuller. Gas quickens out of shallow seams. Dust rides the flow like pollen on a noon breeze. The space around the nucleus thickens, not into storm, but into a richer haze that takes the sun's light and gives it back as a larger, softer lamp. The tail answers too. It stands a little straighter away from the star, then lengthens, as if remembering how to be a banner again. The green we have been nursing along deepens for a while, then steadies, then wavers with the traveller's slow turn. Nothing here is permanent. The veil is a living edge between cold and warm, and at the hinge of the journey it shows its most patient abundance. We do not count heartbeats. We feel the rhythm change in the way a room brightens when a cloud lets go of the sun. There is a moment, sometimes, when geometry writes a trick of light that looks like contradiction. A second tail seems to aim the wrong way, not away from the sun, but along a line that points, for a night or two, toward it. It is not a rebellion. It is a perspective. Larger grains, less easily pushed by sunlight, follow the traveller's path like pebbles sliding along a shallow groove. When we stand in just the right place, that sheet of slow dust lines up with our sight and sketches a faint spear that appears to oppose the main tail. Seen from another angle, the illusion dissolves. Here, at the closest pass, the stage is set for such alignments because the fan of material and the plane of the orbit and our own narrow stance in space briefly cooperate. We let the picture be what it is, a gentle reminder that direction is a matter of where we stand. Watchers are ready for this hinge. Above weather, instruments that live in daybreak forever keep their calm gaze on the sun and anything that wanders near its blaze. On mountaintops, domes crack open like white shells and turn their glass toward the glow. Elsewhere, a quiet pair of mirrors in orbit weighs heat rather than colour, listening where our eyes cannot. None of them hurry. They take turns, trade notes, and stitch a continuous ribbon from their separate windows. And in the middle of their careful work, we allow the world around us to soften for a minute. The fan whirs like surf, too far to see. The window breathes a thin salt of air. Somewhere a mop bucket rolls and settles, a small tide in a hallway. A dog sighs twice and forgets why. You feel the mattress tilt you a fraction deeper. The instruments keep watching. The room keeps easing. Both are forms of patience, and both are enough. Close inspection of the traveller's heart shows no dramatic splitting. A few grains, a few clumps, perhaps a spray of powder finer than flour. These are ordinary, the small commerce of heat meeting porous ice. The nucleus holds its outline, softened by its own weather, but intact. In some stories, this is where comets fail, cracking under stress and writing their ends in tatters of dust. Not here, not now. The skin flexes. The seams open and then pinch again. The body abides its passage, proving only that cohesion can be quiet and strong at once. Images from different hours line up, the same core brightness, the same modest shape, the same rotating fans that thicken and thin with the day. Relief is not needed, only recognition. We are seeing endurance scaled to a small world that has never practiced summer until tonight. As the traveller moves beyond the golden post, warmth does not vanish at once. Heat that made its way inward leaks back out along a slow gradient, like tea cooling in a thick mug. Patches that woke late keep breathing for an extra hour. A jet that stood tall at noon slouches, but does not quit until evening's deeper cold takes it by the shoulders. This is why the veil does not collapse. The instant distance grows. The body carries a memory of light, and that memory spends itself gradually, paying out in continued glow, in a tail that still looks confident, in a green that steps down through softer shades instead of going dark. If you have ever walked away from a bonfire and felt the heat on your coat long after the flames were behind you, you know enough to understand this. The physics are formal elsewhere. Here, they are human. So the hinge swings, and the tide turns. The nearest nearness recedes behind us like the crest of a gentle wave. Haze thins by degrees. The banner loosens and lengthens into pale threads. Instruments keep their watch, quiet as gulls on pilings. Our room keeps its watch, quiet as a beach after sunset. Let the shore you imagine be wide and clean. Let a last line of foam draw a delicate lace and then withdraw. The traveller is already a step farther, bright enough to follow, calm enough to leave. We stand where water and sand bargain in whispers, and we listen until even the whisper is a comfort. Then we turn toward home with unhurried feet, carrying the hush with us. The shoreline keeps breathing. The night holds. Begin very small. The soft click of a lens cap in a dark dome. The rubber of a focus ring under a gloved thumb. A square of red light on a notebook, its brightness turned down to a heartbeat. Now pull back. One hill, then many hills, each topped with white shells that open like patient flowers. Higher still, the line of night becomes a fabric stitched by distant Windows in orbit, machines that never see rain. I think of it as a quilt of lenses, every patch cut from a different piece of sky, every seam a cable of data running home. When the traveller brightens or dims, when its veil thickens or thins, these eyes above the weather, and these eyes within it share the work. Stitched light becomes understanding. Understanding becomes calm. The room can stay dark while the picture grows clear. Some of those windows belong to far-off sentries that circle other worlds. They watch their own skies for science of their own, but sometimes the geometry lines up and they can lend us a glance. From the vantage of another planet, a plume or tail can be seen in a different relief, the way a dune shows its shape only when the sun is low. It is a spare angle, a kindness of alignment, not a daily service. Yet it reminds us that the solar system is not a single balcony with one view, but a building with many windows and many halls. The traveller passes through all of them in turn, and each frame adds a quiet fact. Here the veil is broader, there the tail stands cleaner, here a jet makes a faint fan. None of this is frantic. The quilt builds one careful square at a time. Closer to the sun, other watchers keep vigil. They live in a world of permanent morning, instruments made to look into glare. With coronagraphs that put an artificial eclipse in place, they let the star step aside just enough to reveal what swims near it. A bright sheet of dust becomes a river in their field. A sudden tilt of the tail shows the hand of sunlight and charged wind. These sentinels do not sleep or close for weather. They send a steady braid of images to Earth, a metronome of brightness and angle. From them we learn how the traveller behaves when the light is harshest, when the veil is forced thin, and the larger grains keep their stubborn course. The view is spare, high contrast, almost musical in its regularity. Measured, 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 like waves marking rock. Back under air, great mirrors open and breathe frost, then shine. The air steadies, the guide star acquires, and the dome settles into its slow swivel. On one ridge, the seeing is crystalline. On another, the wind insists, and the exposure stretches to make peace. Filters slide, one that admits the green note of carbon's brief song, one that prefers the pale of dust, one that favours starlight to keep the field honest. A laser chases the twinkle out of the atmosphere, flattening the river of air so the picture can hold still. Observers trade the eyepiece for a screen, and the screen for a file, and the file for a shared ledger where nights are stacked like plates. The traveller moves a little between each frame. Its veil breathes, its tail leans. The mountain keeps its shoulder to the wind and writes another calm line. What matters is not one image, but cadence. A single snapshot is a postcard, a stack is a diary. Night after night, the brightness rises and falls with the traveller's turn, with weather in space, with distance from the lamp. The diary shows when the pulses repeat, when they wander, when a new patch wakes and adds its breath to the chorus. It also shows the lulls, the intervals, when everything holds steady enough for the eye to rest. Above the atmosphere, the metronomes continue. On the ground, there are clouds, maintenance windows, a generator that needs coaxing, a technician who brings tea in a paper cup and leaves it by the keyboard. The interruptions are part of the music. Many instruments together erase the gaps and keep the melody whole. That, too, is stitched light, Each band of light carries a different secret. The visible shows shape and the easy gleam of dust. The infrared listens for warmth and whispers the recipe of ices as they let go. The ultraviolet tells on fragile fragments that live only a moment in sunlight before they break. When you lay these bands together, the traveler stops being a silhouette and becomes a layered drawing. Here is the skin that warms fastest. Here is the breath that lifts faint grains. Here is the green fringe where carbon sings for a minute and is gone. In one band, the tail looks like smoke. In another, it is a parade of tiny lanterns shedding heat. If you have ever held tracing paper over a map and added one line at a time, you know the feeling. Depth built from transparency. Certainty built from overlap. Now the domes close. Red lights dim. A last file copies with a gentle chime. The morning wind finds the guy wires and hums a single note. In orbit, the sentinels keep their long watch, but here the shutters come down and the ladders are climbed and the doors are latched with a practiced hand. In our room, the lamp does the same. One click softer, then another. Outside, the traveller continues, untroubled by our rituals, bright enough for another night, calm enough to let go of. The lantern of attention lowers to a wick, then to an ember. What remains is the shape of the quilt in your mind, and the knowledge that many windows looked, agreed, and rested. Let the ember fall to dark. Let the lantern dim. Sleep, take the rest of the watch. 2 tales, 1 intent, 1 generous. The first is a narrow ray that seems to know exactly where to go, as if a taut thread were being pulled from the nucleus and laid straight into the dark. The second opens like a hand, a pale fan that widens with distance until it becomes more suggestion than shape. Together, they make a tidy cipher, line and veil, arrow and hush. You can read them without names. The ray is the quick responder, a sign of particles so light, or so easily carried by electric fields, that they choose the shortest road away from the sun. The fan is slower, more patient, made of grains with heft enough to remember where they came from. Between them, the traveller writes a sentence you already understand. There are fast things and slow things, and each keeps its own style in the same light. Sunlight is not only brightness, it is a pressure you cannot feel on your skin, but a small body notices it the way a boat notices current. Photons arrive, and even without warmth, they nudge. Grainlets finer than flour accept the suggestion and slide outward, adding their pale presence to the widening sheet behind the traveller. At the same time, charged particles streaming from the sun find the easiest path along magnetic fields and carry wispy traces of gas into that straight, narrow ray. None of this is rough. Nothing is shoved. It is a cumulative courtesy, repeated countless times until the tale you see is the sum of many tiny agreements. Think of rice paper ribbons hung in a doorframe, trembling when someone passes. That is the scale of force we are speaking of, and it is enough. Heavier grains do not hurry. They accept a nudge, yes, but they keep something of their original direction, and so they trace curves instead of straight lines. You can watch them as arcs laid down over hours, each arc a record of the balance between old motion and new push. Far from being stubborn, these grains are simply good at remembering. Their memory is mass, and mass is patience. When many such memories overlap, the fan looks striated, faint streamers nested like pages of a book set slightly askew. The traveller keeps moving, and the streamers lengthen, bowing with that slow arc we have been following since the first glimpse. If you have ever blown across a table scattered with tea leaves and watched some leap while others only slide, you have the feeling. The leaves are not lazy. They are honest about their weight. The nucleus turns and patterns appear. A small vent brightens the fan in one direction, then that enhancement drifts as the body rotates and the vent looks elsewhere. In a stack of images you might think you see spokes, or ribs, or delicate ladders leaning away into space. They are not decorations. They are time written into dust, each rung a minute when a particular patch faced the sun and let go. The pulse we felt in brightness now has a shape you can point to, though it remains modest and shy. Some nights the ribs are strong, other nights they blur into a single wash. Space weather changes its mood, the traveller keeps turning, our own vantage tilts. Yet the basic rhythm holds, a lighthouse sweep recorded not as light on water, but as pale structure in a trailing sheet. And then there is the small mischief of geometry. On the right evening, from the right angle, the slow grains gather along the orbital plane and sketch a slim spear that points sunward, as if a second tail had decided to contradict the first. It is not a contradiction. It is alignment, our line of sight laid into the plane of the traveller's path so cleanly that a sheet of dust becomes an edge. For a night or two the illusion can be crisp, a needle laid against the usual banner. Then, a week later, it is gone, dissolved by a tiny change in where we stand. Nothing about the traveller reversed. We only moved a little, and the drawing on the sky changed, as any drawing does when you tilt it and squint. The lesson is gentle. Direction lives in context. We can enjoy the trick without insisting on a mystery. What do the pictures show when you let night stack into a quiet pile? They show the line tail keeping its poise, a slim witness to the sun's constant breath. They show the fan thinning as distance grows, then freshening on a night when a new patch wakes and adds its grain to the sheet. They show ribs that appear and fade with the traveller's turn, and the faintest of sunward filaments when the geometry is right and the dust is willing. They also show the patience of instruments, the way a coronagraph's false eclipse lets the ray declare itself, the way an infrared spectrograph reads warmth while our eyes see only pale, the way an ordinary camera on a clear mountain night can reveal streamers that were invisible 24 hours before. None of it is perfect. Some frames are soft with air. Some records break for weather. The melody persists anyway. Now we set the science down like paper streamers after a festival and listen to the room. A bus sighs at the far avenue and kneels to the curb. It straightens and lulls away, and the sound folds on itself like a blanket. A dog tags the sidewalk with 2 quick taps of claws and disappears into the kind dark. A spoon remembers a cup and clinks once in the sink. The fan turns a small page in the air and holds it open. You breathe, slow and even. Outside, the 2 tails are still writing their paired sentence, ray and veil, arrow and hush. We will not underline it. We will not summarize. We will simply close this page with care, like lowering a ribbon into a drawer and letting it keep its curve. The book of night waits for the next leaf. We drift to it, and the page turns without a sound. 3, 2, 1. Not a launch, just a way to measure a turn you cannot see. I count because the body out there is counting too, a slow, private arithmetic of day and night on a world the size of a small town. Each number is a position of a lighthouse head you cannot watch directly. Each pause is the beam crossing a deck you occupy only in imagination. The traveller holds its own rhythm, not rushed, not slack, the steady sweep of a thing that has found a balance between sunlight's push and its small gravity, between old spin and new, nudges from breath-thin jets. We do not ask how many hours. We let the cadence show itself in pulses of brightness and changes in the faint ribs of dust that lean from the nucleus like notes on a staff. Count a little, then stop. The room will keep time for us. In that rhythm, jets appear as manners rather than events. They are not engines, they are vents, narrow places where warmed gas finds an easy path into darkness and takes a few grains with it. As the nucleus turns, one vent wakes, then another, each lighting a thin streamer that drifts into the broader fan and becomes part of the page. Sometimes a jet is a pencil line. Sometimes it's only a smudge that you notice more in the behavior of the light than in any sharp shape. On nights when the air is kind and the instruments are patient, these streams seem to tick across the tail like seconds, each one a small exhale marking where the surface has rotated into morning. The music is quiet, and it repeats just enough to feel like intention, though it is only physics making patterns as it always has. Why does that gentle breathing not fling the traveller about? Because every push is tiny against the weight of the whole. Gas leaves the surface as a thin wind, and that wind pulls at the body like a moth tugs at a coat. Over hours, over days, the sum of those tugs can lean the spin a fraction, can shave a moment from the period or add one back, can tilt the axis by less than a thought. But there is no whipping into chaos, no cartwheel in the dark. The mass is a governor, inertia is a cushion. Outgassing writes a footnote in the orbit and a pencil mark in the rotation, and even those marks must be measured with care across many nights to be sure they are real. The story remains one of moderation, signals above noise, but only just. Signs of stability gather in small, consistent ways. The light curve repeats its low hills and shallow valleys at nearly the same intervals from one clear night to the next. The ribs in the dust fan recur where the same patch faces dawn, then soften when evening comes. A vent that brightened last week answers again this week, not identically, but recognizably, as if the surface remembered its own seams. No wild tumbling splinters the pattern into confusion, no double rhythm fights for attention. There may be a slow precession, a tilt that wanders by a degree here and there, but it is the kind of change you perceive only when you compare patient stacks of images and let statistics do their sober work. From our chair, the impression is steadiness. From the domes, the verdict is caution and agreement. Midway through our watch, let the room lean into the quiet. The fan hums as if it had a coastline to keep, a low vowel under the city's breath. A nightbird tests the air and decides against it. The curtain answers a draft with a slow nod, then grows still. A scooter passes, a single thread of sound stretched thin by distance, and then the thread breaks and falls away. You shift once, and your pillow forgives you instantly. In that small silence, imagine the traveller rolling through its own evening, warm patch reluctantly giving up its plume, Another patch, taking a last little breath before shadow closes. The midwatch suits it. It turns. It rests. It turns again. After the bright hinge of closest approach, the rotation keeps its company with lingering heat. The side that was noon an hour ago is still spending stored warmth. The side that is morning is just beginning to learn the day. Jets persist into local evening, then falter. Others wake ahead of sunrise, where the crust has thinned enough to let deeper warmth through. The period may drift by a sliver, as many small jets push against the spin in directions that sometimes add and sometimes cancel. If you looked at the numbers long enough, you might find that the body turns a touch faster or slower than it did before the hinge. If you looked shorter, you would simply see continuity. The whole creature carries forward as if it had practiced this for years, though this may be its first true summer in ages. Interior hints ride on these surface habits. A nucleus that holds its period within a narrow band while venting steadily suggests cohesion. Ice and dust with enough mutual grip to pass heat, along without cracking into panic. A pattern of jets that prefer certain longitudes may whisper of buried channels or pockets where volatiles linger in shelter. The way activity lingers after noon but falters before dawn sketches a modest thermal inertia, a slow seep through layers that are porous but not empty, firm but not fused. None of this demands exotic material or strange forces. It is the signature of a small world that was assembled cold and has stayed mostly cold. The way snow pressed under many winters becomes something like stone without ever forgetting it was snow. We read what we can, and we leave the rest unwritten. Now the sweep comes round again. A faint rib brightens, then fades. The fan relaxes a fraction. The ray holds steady, thin and clean, like a chalk line in the air. I count once more without numbers, just the length of a breath, the time it takes a thought to cross a room. The beam passes. The deck goes dim, soft, hard cut. The turn outward is a soft click you almost miss. A feeling more than an event, like a long train easing past the platform so slowly that only the steady drift of windows tells you it is leaving. The traveller has taken its nearest look at the sun, and now lets distance gather again. Nothing tightens, nothing snaps. The arc relaxes into open space, the way a bow unbends after sending an arrow. I name it for us in a low voice, homeward, though its home is not ours, and then I let the word fade. We are simply watching a small body keep the promise of its path. The station lamps recede on the metal of its cars. The rails hum less. The night keeps most of its quiet. Before we follow it farther, let the room place its own markers. A late truck sifts down the avenue and leaves a ribbon of sound that thins to thread. A door latch yields somewhere above us and finds its seat again, polite as a nod. Air slips under the sill and gives the curtain one slow breath. A phone face down on the table stays dark. The world agrees to wait. Your shoulders take the message and lower themselves a notch. Somewhere behind the buildings, a river applies its steady vowel to the stones and promises to keep doing so for a very long time. We listen to these small witnesses for a minute and call it enough. The train moves on, quieter now, and we are already calmer for having noticed that the world will help us rest. No alarms meet this departure. The traveller keeps more of its old haste than the sun can borrow. even after the long bend around the light. It is coasting downhill on a road that never turns back, carrying exactly the speed it needs to remain unkept. You can imagine gravity as a kindly station master who walked along for a few steps, took a hand briefly, and then let go where the platform ended. From here, the distance grows each night, and the pull grows smaller with it, a well you climb out of without looking down. The tale is simple enough to rest inside. One pass, one sentence, a clean margin. No additional force is required, and no dramatic shove will arrive. The sun returns to its ordinary work. The guest continues its errand. Farther out, the map is generous. There are wide aisles between the planets, and the traveller keeps to one of them. Its line doesn't thread needles or court close encounters, not by plan, but by luck and geometry. A giant world is far off to the side. A smaller one will arrive late to a place the traveller has already left. Calculations made in observatories and quietly checked, again, show the same story each time. A path that clears familiar orbits with room to spare, and a speed that remains above what would be needed to bind it. We aren't part of its itinerary. We are simply a balcony it passed beneath, and now the street opens into a dark, patient square. From that square there are only roads that go on. Behind the traveller, the signs of heat begin to thin. The fan of dust relaxes into longer, paler threads. Fine grains, once quick to answer sunlight, drift outward and fade into the sky's own grain. Heavier specks keep their slow curves a while longer, then surrender to distances too large for us to read. The straight, narrow ray drawn by ionized gas holds its poise for a time, and then frays as the fountain at the source dwindles. On certain evenings, the little sunward spear we once saw as a trick of alignment refuses to assemble. The geometry no longer cooperates, and the sheet of slow dust becomes a sheet again, instead of an edge. Night by night, the chorus grows quieter. The song, however, still has verses left. Even as it recedes, there is much to gather. Stacks of images tell us how quickly the glow falls with distance, and which grains linger longest. Spectra, taken while the veil remains bright enough to weigh, still refine the recipe of ices and dust that made this small world what it is. Timing of the last, faint pulses in brightness helps tighten the estimate of the turn, and with it our sense of how the interior passes heat and holds together. The numbers are not trophies, they are seeds for next time. They teach our instruments what to expect when another letter from the wider galaxy slides under the door. They let models of dust and light improve without swagger. They let us say, softly and correctly, this is how an unkept guest departs. So the long train becomes a low line of lamps, then a scatter, then only the hint that you once saw lamps at all. I picture one window still lit 3 cars from the end, and I let that window stand for the traveller's receding glow. It is not waving goodbye. It is merely there, smaller each minute, steady for as long as it can be, and then not needed. The sky reclaims its deeper graphite. Stars press forward in their gentle multitudes. We keep a little of the hush it brought as a token, the way a commuter keeps a ticket stub until it dissolves in a pocket. Leave it there. Let it wear thin. The starglow lingers a breath longer, and then even that breath is only air. 3 small frames, laid side by side like photographs on a table. First, a shard of dusk that slipped through our yard without a veil, quick and self-possessed, leaving only a puzzle of light and a trace of extra speed. Second, a classic fountain, grain and vapor in full conversation, a traveller that behaved like a comet, even as it declared its foreign birth. Third, tonight's guest, the one we've been moving with in low voice, wearing a soft green fringe and a patient tail that knows how to lean with light. I name none of them aloud here. Names can wake the mind too sharply. Instead, I let the frames breathe, and I invite you to notice how different shapes can carry the same message. The message is simple, not from here, yet consistent with here's physics. 3 pages from a family album we only just began. Frame 1 feels like a chip of mirror. It came and went with barely a whisper of dust. No soft halo to betray the usual breath of warmed ices. The light it reflected rose and fell as the body turned, suggesting a form that was not round, perhaps stretched or flattened, perhaps both, depending on what angle we were granted. Instruments measured a tiny nudge beyond gravity's pull, a non-shouting push that argued for something leaving its surface, though the usual signatures of gas were shy or absent to our best eyes. It taught us that a visitor could be spare. It taught us that absence is also information. In the album, I keep it as a sliver, silver grey, fast, a study in restraint and inference. It left questions without leaving unease. It left us better at listening for quiet forces. Frame 2 is easier to read. The fountain announced itself at once. A bright coma, a dust fan with good posture, a narrow ray pointing cleanly away from the sun. Spectra found the fingerprints of familiar ices, some in proportions that told of a colder nursery than our own comets usually remember. Grains of many sizes wrote their arcs with confidence. The nucleus kept its integrity through the turn near the sun and then walked outward under a thinning veil, exactly as a well-made small world might do on a first true summer in many ages. No tricks of absence, no need to squint at an outline and guess. It was a letter, written in a handwriting we recognized, even if the ink was from a distant well. In the album, I leave this one as a bright, grain-rich print, a fountain that did not apologize for being a fountain. Frame 3 is the one still drying on the line. Our guest carries more colour than the first and more hush than the second. Its veil answers the lamp with that mint edge we have watched thicken and thin. Jets lift like penciled strokes and then soften as the slow turn brings evening to each patch. The tail is neither a boast nor a whisper. It is a steady banner with ribs that come and go like remembered notes. Nothing about it insists on surprise. Everything about it suggests a recipe kept cold for a very long time and now warmed enough to share. If the first frame is a shard and the second a fountain, this third is a lantern. Green-tinted glass, simple flame, carried at an even pace along a quiet road. The album likes the balance. So do I. Likeness does not mean sameness. The shard's slight extra push without a visible breath, the fountain's generous chemistry and textbook tale, the lantern's green signature and even temper, each tells a different piece of the larger story. One says that interstellar visitors can be lean and still honest. One says they can be exuberant and still unfamiliar in their mix. One says they can be calmly present, neither rarefied nor riotous, and still speak of a childhood under other lamps. If you listen to all 3 together, you hear a chord rather than a single note. The chord resolves to this. The galaxy sheds small worlds, the way trees shed seeds, and a few drift through our light without breaking any rules. Our task is not to force them into one mould, but to let their differences teach us where they were grown. Tools have grown with the album. The shard taught us to weigh faint pushes and to be wary of insisting on what we could not see. The fountain rewarded narrowband filters and long watches, letting us map gas against dust, night by night. The lantern has been kind to every window, optical, infrared, near-sun coronagraphs, each filling a gap left by the others. Together, they give us a habit of comparison instead of proclamation. When our new visitor arrives, we will ask first what it shares with these three frames, and only then what it lacks. The answer may come in shape, or in chemistry, or in the way the tail keeps time with rotation. It may come in what refuses to appear. Either way, we will have shelves to set it on, and labels gentle enough not to wake the room. Close the album for tonight. Let the covers meet with a soft breath of paper. Behind your eyes, the three frames linger. A quick silver sliver, a bright fountain, a green lantern moving at a measured pace. None demands a verdict. All offer companionship. They make our present guest less lonely and our sense of the sky more complete. I slide the album back onto its shelf and touch the spine with 2 fingers. The curtain stirs once and goes still. In that stillness, a last thought folds itself small. Other pages will come. For now, this is enough. Curtain down, whisper soft. In a quiet house of memory, there is an attic, and in that attic, there are boxes. Cardboard softened by years, string knotted twice, a faint frost along the lids, as if the air itself had kept them cold. I lift one, and dust rises like a small constellation, patient and undecided. Inside are keepsakes from winters we did not live, pieces that remember the feel of distance better than we ever could. Our traveller is such a box, carried down from the far rafters of the galaxy and set on the floor of our light for a moment. When we open it, we do not find explanations. We find textures. We find grains that still hold their chill, and ices that behave as if the sun were a rumour. We learn by touch, slowly, as if turning pages with mittened hands. Let the room keep us while we look. A ceiling fan writes a soft circle in the air. Somewhere a neighbour rinses a cup and sets it upside down with a hollow clap. Night insects stitch a thin thread just outside the screen. A motorbike passes like a single drawn line and fades. Your breath answers with its own small tide, out and in, out and in. The traveller's box waits on the floorboards of the mind, cool to the imagined palm. We lift its lid. Preserved inside are volatiles that haven't learned routine summers, simple ices that held their shape for ages because no star asked them to melt. When sunlight finally reaches them, they do not puddle first. They loosen and speak as vapour, carrying with them a record of the deep cold shelves where they formed. In that breath are hints of the room where they were born. Those rooms live far from any warm hearth. In the outskirts of young systems, where the star's hand is gentle and the nights are long, grains grow skins of ice that trap carbon and other quick spirits. Some become the raw material of comets that will orbit their home sun. A few are thrown outward and lose their address. The proportions locked into these frosts. How much water to other ices? How much simple carbon to more fragile cousins are a dialect of distance. Warm inner kitchens write one recipe, cold outer pantries write another. Our guest speaks the outer tongue. Its breath suggests shelves where heat was a visitor, not a resident, where time moved like a glacier and chemistry took the long way around. We do not need to recite the map of those shelves to feel what it means. Beyond the common snowlines, in the slow ring of plenty, a small body learned to keep what the dawn would squander. Between stars the box travelled, not for a season, not for a century. For a span so wide, it unbuttons our sense of scale. It drifted through rooms without lamps, past clouds that were only rumours, along corridors where gravity is a courtesy rather than a law. Encounters were few. The skin of the box gathered a polish from nothing more than time. When at last a distant well of light bent its path inward, it carried that long quiet with it. This is why the first warming matters. The record is unblurred by a dozen earlier summers. The lid lifts cleanly because no hand has lifted it before. If we listen closely, we can hear the long hall behind it, the patient hush of a journey that did not hurry and did not end until it reached our foyer. What we take from the open box is not a single relic, but a set of comparisons. Models of how dust and ice behave in young disks are small machines. They improve when we feed them true pieces from beyond our yard. When the traveller's breath shows a certain mix, the machine adjusts a gear. When the dust grains carry sizes in an unexpected ratio, another gear moves a notch. When the afterglow lingers longer than our local comets would allow, the spring that measures thermal inertia relaxes or tightens. Each change is modest, but the sum is a kinder clock. Next time, the machine will start closer to the truth. Next time, the question will be smaller and the answer will arrive with less fuss. This is how we learn without making a racket, by laying one quiet sample beside another and letting the pattern argue for itself. There is also the learning that happens in posture. Across mountaintops and in orbit, people turn down their voices and turn up their patience. One team sends a narrow strip of green light through the veil to see where carbon sings. Another listens for warmth no eye can see. A third counts the slow rise and fall of brightness as the body turns. They trade files and restraint. They correct one another gently. When an image seems to promise too much, a spectrum brings it back to Earth. When a spectrum runs ahead, an image calls it to slow down. The box is never emptied by one pair of hands. It is opened by many. The contents passed palm to palm without dropping, until a common picture emerges. Cold kept these things. Heat releases them. The release is orderly and small, and in that smallness there is trust. At the end, we put the tissue back around the keepsakes and close the lid. The attic steps take us down to the cooler part of the house. We slide the box onto a shelf where it will rest until memory calls for it again. Outside, the night keeps its long, low breathing. A distant shore draws the water thin and lets it return, draws it thin and lets it return. What the dust remembers will stay remembered, carried forward in models and in the easy caution of the watchers. We have asked enough questions for one sitting. We have heard enough small answers. The tide slackens, then ebbs, leaving a damp gloss on the sand and the faintest lace where the last wave turned. That is where we stop. That is where we rest. At the far line where night keeps its promises, there is a seam so fine you could miss it by blinking. A horizon is only a meeting, yet it feels like a vow. Above, the quiet cold. Below, the rooms where we sleep. Between them, a thin silver seam that says, both are true. I think of our traveller as something that has crossed many such seams, sliding from one star's dark to another's morning without belonging to either. When we widen the frame, the single passage becomes part of a patient traffic, rare enough to notice, real enough to accept. The galaxy is not a barricade of separate yards. It is a neighbourhood where leaves blow from porch to porch, where a few seeds ride every wind. We live under that horizon, and sometimes a visitor writes on it for a season, then goes on. Across that seam, watchers keep their lamps low and their windows open. Wide-field surveys sweep the sky in repeating arcs, measuring the points that move while the rest hold still. Some nights the harvest is quiet. Nearby stones, routine crossings, the ordinary business of a busy system. Other nights a dot arrives with a motion that does not match the family's habits. The math sharpens. The arc refuses to close. Notes go out along the wires, and telescopes turn like sunflowers to follow. Panoramas are made from fragments. Calendars are made from single dates that gather company. Week by week, the picture clarifies. A visitor from the between places, a small world that has waited a long time to warm its face in our light. The sweep continues, not hurried, not boastful, just thorough as rainfall. From these sweeps we collect a grammar. One letter was a shard that taught restraint. Another was a fountain that taught generosity. This one is a lantern that teaches poise. Together, they arrange into an alphabet of behaviour. How unbound paths look from far away, how colours lean when simple molecules wake, how dust keeps time with rotation, how tails answer pressure and field. The grammar improves with every page. Models that once guessed, now remember. Instruments that once strained, now relax into the right settings. Patience learns where to stand, to see an edge become a spear, and where to wait so the spear returns to a sheet. None of this cancels mystery. It only gives the mystery better shoes for walking. Our questions get smaller, and in getting smaller, they become kinder. Some parts remain beyond our lamps, and that is a mercy. We do not always know which nursery cast a traveller outward. We cannot always tell whether a faint push came from a seam we failed to see, or from sunlight working in a way we haven't modelled yet. There are distances we cannot close, and timescales that do not care to be counted. Even so, the unknown no longer masquerades as danger. It is simply the room beyond the door, waiting until we have slept enough to enter it with good manners. We can say we don't know without waking the house. We can sleep and let the question wait on the table beside a glass of water and a folded note. Morning will come. The note will still be there. The water will still be clear. While we pause, I want to thank you for walking the long shore with me. You let your breath set the pace. You let numbers become shapes, and shapes become feelings, without asking them to be louder than they are. You stayed for the quiet parts, for the minutes when nothing changed except the clarity of the hush. That too is a kind of science. It is the discipline of attention without hurry. It is the courage to accept that a calm answer can be an answer. If you choose to return, there will be other shores and other lanterns. For tonight, your listening has been enough. The room knows your patience. The room returns it with rest. Now the cadence narrows to what fits on a pillow. The fan lowers its voice and becomes a suggestion. The curtain holds still, except for one last nod. A scooter passes at a distance that feels like memory. The thin silver seam at the window's edge is only the streetlight finding a flaw in the glass. You are here, and the horizon is wherever your breath meets the next breath, then the next. The traveller is already farther, but its lesson remains. Move gently, keep your shape, let warmth come and go without complaint. I will keep the lamp at its smallest setting. You may let yours go out altogether. There is nothing to bridge now. The sentence on the sky has a period, and the page can turn itself. If there is more to say, it can wait until after sleep. If there is more to learn, it will be there in the morning, patient as the seam between dark and day. Hush. The room has grown very quiet, and the night has settled around us like a soft coat. We followed a single traveller from its first green whisper to the long, unhurried road outward. Along the way we noticed what could be named, without strain, a path that does not close, a veil that breathes with warmth, a tale that keeps two kinds of time. Instruments near and far shared their windows, and together they made a steady picture. No alarms, just patient agreement. Other visitors have come before, each carrying its own style. This one brought a calm lantern glow, and the reassurance that ordinary physics can feel like wonder when seen slowly. If your eyes are closing, let them close. The questions can sleep on the table beside you, folded and safe. Tomorrow they will still be there, and so will the sky. For now, keep only the simplest parts, a thin silver seam at the edge of sight, a breath that arrives and leaves, the knowledge that distance can be kind. Thank you for your company and your trust. May your night be unbroken, your dreams uncomplicated, and your waking gentle. I'll be here when you want another quiet journey, with the lamp turned low and the map already open. Good night.